in collaboration with Crytek. (1896), Louisiana drowns in disease and darkness. It began with whispers, strange illnesses in the bayou where mass hysteria and nightmares plagued entire communities. Madness took hold, people vanished, and those who remained began to change. Some turned manic, others schizophrenic, most of them grew violent. A disease which no doctor could name had gripped the bayous, and while the authorities blamed it on the poor, on vice, on God's wrath, this sickness in the swamps wasn't just in the flesh, for behind the hysteria, the violence and the rot, something deeper was stirring, something old, and what would soon follow would threaten the very existence of mankind. This is the story of the Louisiana event. In 1894, during the warmest summer that Louisiana had ever seen, the inhabitants of the state noticed that something felt off. For this heat wave wasn't the only thing that seemed to be out of the regular. Yet what it was exactly was impossible to pinpoint. It was almost similar to the sensation prior to a thunderstorm, an unfamiliar smell hanging in the air, hiding just behind what was common, yet strange enough to be unsettling. Then came the insects, bugs, bees, mosquitoes and wasps. The air grew thick with them, saturating the bayous with relentless swarms of buzzing chitinous wings. And then the illnesses, headaches, sweats, fevers, and the dreams. People spoke of voices in their head and distant urges within their beings so dark that they did not dare to acknowledge them. Soon the dreams turned to nightmares and sleeplessness. A slow yet undeniable detrimental influence was spreading within a multitude of communities, an influence which slowly decayed into anxiety, paranoia, and ultimately outbursts of anger. Sporadic cases of violence began to appear, first between families, then between friends, then neighbors, and then strangers. Nightmares turned to madness, and the infection of the bayous continued to worsen. Dark visions of mutilation, maiming, and killing became common. Families locked their doors in daylight, trying their best to avoid neighbors who were now insane and borderline murderous. Town by town, the symptoms spread. Insomnia, fever, hallucinations. Then began the disappearances, with entire hamlets gone silent overnight. Locals called it a plague. The papers called it the return of the yellow fever. Yet this outbreak didn't act like any other disease. It didn't follow any pattern, no discernible logic, just unsystematic victims and incomprehensible vectors of infection. The afflicted would become incoherent, schizophrenic, hearing voices and sounds while babbling in hysteric fits of anxiety and paranoia. Some scratched symbols into their walls, others into their skin. Many wandered off into the swamps, never to be seen again. Still, the governor dismissed it as poverty and panic, the natural state of the poor, he said, underlining that God-fearing folk had nothing to fear. Yet what stirred in Louisiana was not sent by God, for in the end it wasn't a fever, and it wasn't collective madness. It was something else, something far worse, moving behind the sickness and decay. And as it turns out, all of this violence was just the beginning. For the murdered The killed, the slain, and the butchered would no longer stay dead. All of a sudden, corpses of friends, family, and neighbors arose from their death, driven by a relentless hatred for the living, immediately turning on the people next to them. Casualties skyrocketed, and the bayous turned into a vicious cesspool of murder and demise. Yet while the poor was left alone to fend for themselves, while the authorities decided to stay inactive, someone else was watching. Someone not of the government, not of the church, but an organization behind the veils of secret societies, and organizations where records were burned and shadows kept their own ledgers. They were people who had seen this incident before, and so they decided to intervene. The American Hunters Association did not come to Louisiana in force. They came quietly, like a shadow. For centuries, the A.H.A. had moved in the background of societies, tracking, cataloging, and eliminating the unnatural. Not out of righteousness, not out of fear, but to contain it, because it had to be done. They had seen events like this before, yet not on this scale, and not with this kind of reach, but the pattern was familiar. After investigation in the state of Louisiana, they found their source. An entity or force hiding behind the veil of decay and corruption, not a sickness, not a plague, nor a god, something the association would come to call the Sculptor. After identifying the core threats of the incident, the A.H.A. fell back on their modus operandi, and hunters, members of the organization, would be sent into the affected zones to locate and eliminate creatures tied to this Sculptor's corruption. Yet the role of the hunters was not just to kill the creatures, but banish them from our realm. This essence of the Sculptor's creatures had to be sealed and contained through a banishment ritual, and the result of this exercise would reveal itself in the shape of tokens, powerful occult relics, brimming with dark energy. If the hunters brought these tokens back to the organization, the A.H.A. could use the essence of the corruption's creature for scientific studies and experimentation to further help their cause in eliminating the Sculptor's presence within our realm, and in return for their time and the token, the hunters would be paid a handsome bounty, well worth their time. And so the hunting grounds were established. Every hunt had a target, every target had a cost, and attached to every cost was a contract. Yet important is it to understand that the Sculptor's influence was not merely passive, for its very presence is a poison to all things that are living, and its corrupting touch twists not just the land, it also twists anyone within its proximity. No regular person, let alone a hunter, could simply walk into the dead zone within the hunting grounds. First, they had to be prepared, or rather, initiated, a way to survive the unseen terror that lurked in the areas, tainted by the presence of the Sculptor. This ritual came to be known as the inoculation, and those who passed through it would never be the same again. No matter their creed, origin, or aspirations in life, all hunters start in the same place. The blood ritual, the initiation into the hunt. The ritual is a blend of alchemy and occult procedure, an injection of distilled demon's blood used to protect the initiates against the presence of the dark arts. Those who received it would partially become part of the other side, enabling them to walk into the dead zones intact, at least temporarily. For anyone else setting foot inside the reach of the Sculptor, it would be an immediate death sentence. for the presence of the corruption corrodes not just the flesh, but also mind and memory. Yet this protection granted against the dark also gifted or cursed the initiated with the ability of sight, a gift that opened a gateway into the many layers of reality, granting them vision between our world and the sculptors. In this endless storm of ash, impressions, residues, and trails left by the sculptor's influence became visible to them. It was imperfect, dangerous, yet necessary. With each hunt, those who survived grew ever closer to the other side, changing, bridging the gap between human and demon. Yet the inoculation did not just protect them, it marked them. After initiation, a hunter was no longer part of the world they had left behind, for no matter their origin, soldier, preacher, murderer, or mercenary, they now belonged to the hunt, and they could no longer turn back. A contract begins with a name, a target identified, a creature of the sculptor's will. A hunter is then chosen for the expedition, prepared, and sent into the zone. The territory that awaits the hunter is always hostile, for within the dead zone, nothing can be trusted. Not the light, not the water, nor the shadows, or the silence. For within the sculptor's domain and the hunting grounds, almost 2 years had passed since its infectious touch first took hold of our realm, and its corruption and darkness had festered to such a degree that it was no longer merely the dead of men who the hunters had to watch out for. Armored bulwarks acting as the corruption's guard dogs, broken and contorted bodies of women protruded by massive beehives, men torched by relentless anger, endless amount of undead canines ready to tear apart the living, massively malformed fetuses, and bears of the dead would all attempt to prevent the hunters from completing their mission. Then there was, of course, standing above everything else, the targets of the contracts, the sculptor's apex predators, the avatars of its corruption. But alas, despite the dangers, the contract had been accepted and now had to be honored. To locate the target, the hunter must first find 3 clues. These are gateways of the sculptor's corruption into our world, oozing its sickness into its immediate proximity. Closing one does not only help the realm, it also allows the hunter to peer into the other side, narrowing down the search for their intended target. And while the sculptor hides its creations well, the hunter's ability to utilize sight reveals their presence through the cracks. Once the lair is found, there is no room for hesitation. The target must be destroyed. Yet should a hunter overcome all of this, the tracking, the surviving, the killing, and the banishment, then they're not even halfway, for that was the easy part. The banishment ritual is loud, and its raw output of energy calls out to everything in the region, especially other hunters. When the banishment ritual is finished, what's left behind is not a corpse, but a token, a volatile relic of dark energy formed from the essence of the creature's soul. This token pulses with unnatural power, granting the wielder sharpened intuition, the awareness of nearby threats, and even the gift of sight that pierces both walls, trees, and terrain. Yet through this immense power, the wielder also becomes a beacon. The moment the token is claimed, all hunters in tune with the occult will not only feel its presence, they will know exactly where the wielder is. And if the hunt has taught us one thing, it is that hunters are rarely willing to share. For other hunters have their own contracts, their own desires, and their own desperation. For some of them, the bounty is the key to buying their freedom. Others see it as a right of survival, proof of their abilities. Yet for many, the hunt is all they have left, the only thing that still has meaning to them. With the token now in their possession, extraction is the final step. Whether by river, whether by cart, or whether by road, making it out with the bounty alive. Now that is rare. And so the hunters become the hunted, having to face a plethora of their brothers and sisters in the swamps. It is a gauntlet of fire where only the strongest survive. Yet those who make it out on the other end gain immense powers, abilities that make them quieter, faster, harder to kill. Yet the more a hunter comes into contact with the other side, the more they change. And in the end, no matter how much they earn, it's never enough to stop. For ultimately, when examined closely, the type of people that venture into the bayous are enough to make one wonder who are really the monsters, those in the swamps, or those who hunt them. For a time, despite minor internal problems, the contracts and the American Hunters Association held their ground against the corruption. Orders were followed, contracts were fulfilled, but the Sculptor's influence doesn't just warp the land or flesh, it corrupts the very essence of purpose. The longer the incursion dragged on, the more the A.H.A. began to fracture, and while some still believed in containment, others wanted to harness the power for themselves, and a few even began to worship the very concept of the corruption. Loyalty gave way to ideology, then opportunism, then the organization shattered. The organization's command structure crumbled through internal chaos. Leadership positions were assassinated, and as the entire thing collapsed, in its place came factions, cults, pacts, and mercenary houses. Some of them hunted the corruption, some of them hunted the hunters, each of them carrying their own belief, their own reason to fight. Some saw the Sculptor as divine reckoning, others wanted to tame its power. Yet in the chaos of hunters siding against or with the corruption, there were simply those who fought for profit, vulturing the dead, collecting relics, and trafficking forbidden knowledge. And so the hunt turned from eradication to something else, not a mission, not even survival, but a civil war of the already damned. And through this absence of action, the source of the corruption remained untouched. No one knows what the Sculptor truly is. Not even the American Hunters Association could define it. In the end, it is an entity that doesn't speak and doesn't ask for anything from its subjects. It is a being that only reshapes. It isn't a mind nor a god. Rather, it is a force of nature, a cataclysmic presence of unimaginable scale, a weight of cosmic horror pressing against the skin of the world. It is summoned where suffering gathers, where madness blooms, and where pain and torment is plentiful. When it finds those places, it festers, slowly, quietly, until the trees rot, until the dead rise, until nothing remembers what life used to be. Yet it is not a creature of intelligence, for the Sculptor doesn't hate, it doesn't love, nor does it have a plan or a divine purpose. It is simply an eldritch entity that feeds. Feeds on pain, feeds on ruin, feeds on the unraveling of what was once human. It spreads like cancer, not with direction, but with certain inevitability. Some of the cults call it salvation, most others, damnation. Some believes that it offers a higher form of being. Still others say it's the end of all forms entirely. Though the American Hunters Association is gone and factions are scattered, the hunt still doesn't end. Contracts continue to surface, tokens are still being extracted, and the corruption continues to spread. For despite the killing, the danger, and all the suffering, it seems that someone will always answer the call. The hunters continue to flock to Louisiana. Some come alone, some in pairs, some even in trios. Quiet, armed, determined, they venture into the hunting grounds. Some for money, others for redemption, most because the hunt is all they have left. But in the end, they all return, again and again, because in the hunting grounds, death is the price of entry, and survival only buys you the chance to do it all again. So with death lurking around every corner, the question remains, when you decide to venture into that darkness once again, are you certain you will live to die another day? Hey there, A.H.A here. That covers the basic of Hunt Showdown and should give you a general idea about the who, the what, the how, and the why within the game. But if you want to take a deeper dive into Hunt Showdown as a whole, then I have an entire playlist with more than 40 videos spanning over 12 hours in total, covering just about any question you might have about the monsters, the factions, the hunters, and anything else in between. I'll attach that playlist right here, but you can also find it in the description below. You can also join my personal Discord to engage with the rest of this wonderful community. And you can find a link to that in the description below as well. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. Every little bit helps the channel immensely. Now, I have some quite exciting news that I can't fully share yet, but I will follow up on that later. However, in collaboration with Crytek, we have decided to do a huge giveaway of DLC consisting of a total of 15 keys. These are 5 keys of the Last of the Herd, 5 keys of Dead Man's Gut, as well as 5 keys of the Ghost of Blanchett Graves. If you want to enter the giveaway, all you have to do is like the video, share it with a friend of yours so we can get them hooked on Hunt Showdown 2, and drop a comment below with the words, "I love lore." The DLC in this giveaway will only be available for PC and Steam, and the deadline for entering your comment will be on the 31st of July 2025, where the winners will be announced here on the channel the very next day on the 1st of August. And with that said, as always, a big thanks goes out to the Hunters Lounge, specifically the exclusive Johnny Sevens, the exclusive The Coyote, the exclusive Gitchy Boy, the exclusive War Monk, and the exclusive Rat. The VIPs, Corvo Bearslayer, Derivative, Doug Powell, Gino Lucero, Goose, Hambone, Jiminel Bob, Corey Peterson, Michael Fornell, Mortev Minis, Hein, Slip, Stas Biestic, Sunrise Phoenix, TJ Crane, Texas Toast, and the Wizard of Copper, and of course, all the regulars. If you want to support the ongoing lore, then consider signing up as a member of the Hunters Lounge for as little as a single $1 a month. The link is in the description below. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.